pilot, then they threw me on the stations. Nah, I'm not complaining, my thoughts get complicated, I cannot explain in layman's. Never losing focus because I ain't chasing payments. Still playing in the basement while I'm working on arrangements. They heard the kid in 50 countries, thank God that's amazing. But I'd rather thank Spotify, they put me on the station. Same shit, different day, I'm just trying to get paid. Yeah, I'ma stay in the shade so they can't see my face. Yeah, only blow if I know that I got the right strain. Yeah, when I blow then I know that I did it my way. Yeah. Everybody asks me why I'm up so late, man. They think I'm insane, I just wanna create, man. No angel dust till the boy cremated. In heaven with Mr. Cobain, see dated. But that's not for a long time. Cardi for the long nights, party for the hard times. On time at the wrong time. Why the fuck would I try to quantize my jawline? Speeding on the feeder, cause I promised I'd be on time. And I said it last time, it's gotta be the last time. You can play this song if you ever got a bad vibe. Say I'm acting moody cause I've been stuck like Mad Eye. Miss the times when I had nap time and snack time. I style like Billy cause she say I'm a bad guy. She say waste my time just writing all these rap lines.
Hello, hello, hello. How you doing today? My name is Daniel, and this is episode 39 of the Engineering Success Podcast. Appreciate you listening today. Hopefully, you enjoyed listening to episode 38. If you haven't listened to it yet, make sure you do so. I had the pleasure of having a wonderful guest, Mark Levine, on from Thermosystems USA and the ABCs of Control System Engineering. And we had a phenomenal interview about everything that you need to know about trying to become an engineer. If you're in high school and dreaming about being an engineer, if you're in college trying to get your first internship, if you're in graduating from college and applying for your first round of jobs, everything you need to know from resumes to interviews and everything, that video covers on it all. So make sure to watch that video. I will put the link in the description box of this video. Or you can just go to my channel. Actually, just do that. Just go to my channel or go down to the previous episodes if you're listening to the audio version. Make sure you listen to it. That was a really cool interview. Um, what's going on with me? Let's talk about the podcast. So, Spotify Anchor is now Spotify for podcasters. So you might have realized that you're no longer getting my Anchor ad anymore, and that is because Spotify yanked it from me. So I have no other source of ad revenue right now coming into the pod, which is fair because I was making like 5 cents an episode, so really not a big deal. But Spotify has created this new threshold called uh, I don't even know what it's called. It's called whatever it is. I'll look it up on my phone right here. I need to have 100 listeners on Spotify in the last 60 days to qualify for ad revenue, and it's called ambassador ads. And I currently have 20. If you're watching on the screen, so what does that mean? That means that you can really, if you can't support the podcast as a top tier supporter yourself, you can really help the podcast out by sharing it. So I really appreciate those of you that either engage with it in YouTube in the comment section. Please do that. Those of you that share it on your own social medias, and honestly, just by word of mouth, that's the best way to share the podcast. If you know somebody that's in high school, college, early engineering career, this is the podcast for them. If you're dreaming of being an engineer, if you're working on becoming an engineer, or if you're just starting your engineering career journey, this is the podcast for you. So, thank you guys for listening. Let's get into it with the shout outs. Shout out to our top tier supporters of the podcast. Shout out to John Ott. Thank you, John, for your continued support of the podcast. You can join John with getting a shout out at the beginning of every single episode of the podcast for $10 a month. It's about the cost of Paramount Plus. It's cheaper than Netflix. It's like the cost of Hulu. So with that little bit of money, it really helps me go a long way. I use that money in the beginning of the podcast. I invested a lot of my money into getting the video camera and the microphone and but now I use it for softwares like for example I pay like 25 bucks a month to keep my website up to date, www.engringsuccess.com, engineeringsuccess.com. I have an email now, so there are some costs that come along with running the podcast, and every little bit helps. So really appreciate you guys for supporting the podcast or considering to support the podcast. And $10 a month gets you or any safe for work phrase said on the podcast. You just let me know what you want, and you also go on my website on our Hall of Fame. Well, actually, our current top tier supporters list. I'll pull that up right there. You'll go on on the website. You'll get an advertisement. So hey, if you're a business, I don't really care at this point. I'm happy to welcome a business in. That's super affordable advertising, $10, and you just live on my website, and you get shouted out at the beginning of every single podcast episode. So just a super affordable way for if you have a small business to shout yourself out. So anyways, thank you so much, guys, for that. For those of y'all that are tracking what's going on with the baby, I'm still upstairs in what's going to be her nursery or their nursery. For those of you that don't know the gender yet, just pretend you didn't hear that. But we're still setting up the nursery upstairs, and well, and so we're gonna start moving some furniture out of this room soon. Baby showers in a couple weeks, so by the time the baby shower is over, we're gonna have all of our help in the house to help us take care of moving all that stuff. So yeah, so not really too much cooking yet, but I mean, obviously, those things around the corner, and I felt the baby kick for the first time, so that was pretty exciting for me. So I just can't wait to welcome her. So, yeah. All right. Well, let's get into the podcast. You know how we start every single episode. We start every single episode the same way, and that's with link. Just kidding. We have a 5-star review to read. So, and I'll be honest, this one wasn't put on Apple Podcasts, but it doesn't really matter. If you give a testimonial or review the podcast, just send it to me. Send it to me at Daniel at ENGineeringSuccess.com. Kick it to me via email and I'll read it out on the podcast. It's a great way to get a shout out without financially supporting the podcast. So here's one for you guys. This is one of the credible ones. Now, this is from our interview with Mark Levine. I've seen many of your casts, and they're excellent. So, those of you tuning in for the first time, follow this podcast. There aren't a lot of real credible ones out there. This is one of the credible ones. Dan is just a pleasure to talk with. He's a great interviewer. He does a great job. Stick with it. Thank you, Mark. And it's right there. The link to episode 38 is literally right there. All right. So that was our 5-star review for this week. Now we can get into our recurring segment this week in LinkedIn lunatics or career craziness. All right. Here we go. First one. Seeking ladies? Agree? So I think our boy here, if this is a real account, which they have 290 connections. I think our boy here has misunderstood what the purpose of LinkedIn is. LinkedIn is not a dating app, people. LinkedIn is a social networking app for professionalism and career development. So, for those of you that are looking to seek ladies or gentlemen on LinkedIn, why don't we not use? I appreciate that he's straightforward, so we can know to avoid at all costs. But why on LinkedIn? And who is this guy? Yeah, it's more like Kingston. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's kind of ridiculous. But you know, I'd say 10 out of 10. That's not what LinkedIn is for. So, just as a reminder to everybody, LinkedIn is not a dating app. So, avoid doing that because nobody wants to be harassed by you on LinkedIn. So, just uh just stop if you think about hitting on somebody on LinkedIn, don't do it. If you're thinking about sliding into those DMs with something inappropriate like a picture or phrases, they don't want it. They don't want to see what you have to say to them. LinkedIn is where people are trying to be professional and grow their careers, and honestly, ladies and gentlemen, if somebody slides into your DMs with something inappropriate on LinkedIn, I mean, I feel like you should be able to expose. I don't know if like what the legal ramifications are, but if you get an unsolicited thing, I mean, you should be able to put these people on blast. So, um, maybe look into what the ramifications of that are legally before you do it. But I feel like, you know what? Can you post pictures you received unsolicited online? Um, so the act of sending unwanted imagery is against the law depending on where you're at. So, yeah, what I would say is um reposting it could fall into character categories of revenge porn, maybe. I don't know. So don't do that, maybe. But you can definitely consult somebody to get that person because I mean that should be just uh, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. So, all right, next one. This one is from r slash recruiting hell.
Was asked for my college transcripts, from 15 YRS ago. Someone confirm for me how absolutely BS this request is. I have nearly 20 years of experience in the field and for the position I applied for. They recruited me. Then turned around and asked me to produce my college transcripts, from 15 years ago, so that they could confirm that I could qualify for an interview with them. I laughed on the phone, the recruiter was not in fact joking. I told them I could provide a professional reference from every single school that was on my resume. Nope, they wanted to see if I had enough credits to qualify to interview with them. I hung up on her. Edit, this was for an $18/HR job in early childhood ed. It is not the norm for this profession. I believe it was to weed out older candidates. Edit 2, credentials in this field are handled through the state. Every teacher is certified and awarded a registry number which they provide on acceptance of a position. Background checks, accreditation, fingerprinting, everything, is handled through the state. Thank you for everyone pointing out that children deserve caregivers that are accredited and accountable. I agree, that's why I have been in the state's registry for over a decade.
Yeah, so my initial gut feeling on this one was to kind of react the same way that this person did. But then I just kind of I just was sitting on the couch with my wife, who's a teacher, and she was like, "Yeah, just request your transcript from the university." So I don't know if this person realizes that that may be an option for them, but usually the university registrar's office or something like that does office of records does keep your transcript on file. So if you're in a similar situation, just file a request with your university for transcripts. I went to my university's website. Well, I'm going to Trinity University transcript request. And if I click transcript request, I can go to the office of the registrar and look at that. Alumni, you can request your official transcript. So, and they'll get it to you within 3 to 4 days. So, not a big deal, maybe. Maybe not as big of a deal as this person made it out to be. I mean, I maybe their comment would be correct is that it was trying to weed out older people if they thought that older people couldn't request a transcript from the university or the universities wouldn't keep them on file. But my university had a thing last time I requested a transcript. It was like, if your transcript is like from before 1997, then we'll send you a. They had another way of doing it because it's stored in like a different older archival system. So I mean, usually universities have a document management system for storing stuff like this. So, yeah, I'm gonna say not as big of a deal as this person made it out to be. But hey, I mean, yeah, that is frustrating, especially whenever you're already accredited through your state. But it seems like you listed the state accreditation has background checks, accreditation, fingerprinting, and everything. But and I'm sure I assume that part of that accreditation portion is validating your transcript. But maybe these people don't have I don't know the what the program is for your state. Maybe they don't have access to that database. Maybe they have to pay for that database, and maybe there's just or maybe this is just their process. So yeah, it's frustrating. Let's see what the comments say. Comments say ask for company financials going back 15 years to ensure if they have enough stability to offer you job security. Um, I was recently asked for a university transcript. I graduated over 30 years ago. Well, I'll be honest. If I was in my industry, if I was applying for an engineering job, I would expect to get asked for it. a university transcript. I would, because I mean, people put education credentials on their resume, and you have those people that come up through the field as designers, and they don't actually have an engineering degree, but they're very knowledgeable about engineering concepts. But maybe there's an itch somewhere in there to fake an engineering degree. I don't know, but yeah, I wouldn't think it's that difficult um to ask for a transcript, to be honest. I really don't. Um it's not that hard to get one. So I'm going to divulge, well, not divulge, but I'm going to stray from everybody else and say not really that crazy of an ask. So let me know if you disagree down in the comments below. All right, next one. What has LinkedIn become? All right, so this is Rohan's, who is passionately curious and often wrong and always learning. This is his post on LinkedIn. Rachel is one of the hottest girls out there, the fire of your wildest dreams, the envy of everyone you've ever known, and I used to date her. She was the heartthrob of every guy in college, and I got her. I first asked out Monica and Phoebe and even Janice, but they all turned me down. I was so dejected at the time that I almost considered going for Chandler. Those were the worst days of my life. My self confidence was completely shattered. Okay, homophobic. All right, carry on. But then one day I found out that Rachel had been through a terrible breakup and was on a rebound spree. I stalked her for many weeks and then even asked her out a few times and was rejected. Okay, so you're homophobic and you're a stalker. But this time I wasn't going to give up. Her friend had signed her up to try speed dating. This was my one chance, and I grabbed it. For 5 glorious minutes, I dated Rachel. I was given the chance that most would give an arm and a leg for, and then I blew it. We don't talk about that. Over a decade later, it's still the highlight of my life. Of course, we never saw each other again, mostly because she wanted nothing more to do with me, but we don't talk about that either. Anyway, connect with me on LinkedIn to learn why you too should date Rachel. Follow me on Twitter to learn why you should never date Rachel. Hit me up on Instagram to see that one picture I have with Rachel. Check out my latest video on YouTube on how you too can crack Rachel. Subscribe to my weekly newsletter where I continue to share decade old insights from my 5 minute speed date with Rachel. Tip me on OnlyFans where I talk about my dreams and nightmares about Rachel. Like this post and leave comment below if you too aspire to chase Rachel. P.S. Rachel is not for everyone, but if you do everything I say above, she can be for you. Yeah, I can't even tell if this is satire or serious. And that's what this person said. Like I don't even care. Like, dude, even if this is satire, why the heck is it on your LinkedIn? I don't get it. I mean, this person says it looks like a satirical dig at the lunatics who post cringe content, just not a very good one. I usually like this dude's content a lot, but clearly he tried something that didn't work today, and it seems like he's already realized it and taken it down. Yeah, I mean, come on, man. It's just not. It's a little bit homophobic, little bit stalkerish, which I mean, I guess you're implying that to the other people that are posting on LinkedIn, maybe not yourself, but yeah, this is a swing and a miss. It looks like it was an attempt at trying to be satirical on LinkedIn, and it was just not a winner. So sorry, Rohan. You have tried to make fun of the LinkedIn lunatics, and you have become one. What is that saying? I try to destroy my enemies, but then I become one. I don't know. All right, that was not ideal. All right, next one. Basically, paid an exposure with extra steps. All right, this is about Dickie Bush, and I don't really feel bad about exposing Dickie Bush because of what he writes here. Working for free when you don't have skills is asking the employer to pay you. Working for free when you're extremely skilled is the quickest way to get an employer to pay you. Too many people hate the idea of free work. Every person on my team at the moment started by offering to do something for free. And each of them did an A+ job and showed elite skill, which made hiring them an absolute no brainer. Don't think you're too good for free work. Thanks, Dickie. That's so good. It's terrible. Free work is I mean, it's exploitative. So what Dickey is saying is that please join my company where I exploit people for their labor. Please work for me for free so that way I can exploit you. Yes, all these people that are currently on my team did something for free, but let's not talk about the hundreds and hundreds of other people that I exploited and got free labor from because I don't know how to properly run a business model. I help beginner writers start writing along. So basically, he has people do what I'm guessing is happening is people write, and then he has people edit and proofread and give advice. And as an example, as an quote unquote example, to see if they're qualified to help as beginner writers. All right. And then he just uses it anyways and then decides later whether or not he wants to. So, as part of your interview, you're actually already doing output for the company or as part of your probationary period with Dickie Bush's company. And that is because Dickie Bush does not make enough money with his business model to actually pay his employees. So, he'll just get people to give free writing tips and then he'll decide whether or not to hire them. And he'll probably string out that process as long as possible so that way he can get as many free edits for his little website as he possibly can. So shout out to Dickie Bush. Um, yeah, I mean, for my business that makes negative $25 a month, because that's how much it costs to keep my website alive, and I don't make that much money. I don't have people that I mean, I have people that are guests on my podcast, but that's the transactional relationship, right? They're usually on to promote something else. Now, otherwise, they're my friend and they're doing me a favor, and then I thank them profusely. But what I don't do is I don't go out and have somebody edit my videos for free for exposure or edit my podcast for exposure because that is like the core of what I do is generate a video and generate a podcast. And the core of what he does is probably um, giving writing tips. So what the core of he does is that he gets people to also give those writing tips and edit papers probably or writing samples for free. Does not pay them and then charges the client money for it. And that is terrible. So let's go to the comment section. If you can't afford to pay people for work, you shouldn't be in business. My time is given for free to charity only. I decided to update his profile picture. This is a risk. This is a risk. I don't know what this video is going to be. You know what? I'm not going to look at that picture. That's a risk. Wow, these nerds on the internet sure love my content. I must be doing something right. Yeah, I actually am definitely too good for free work. What's that? Um, reading this and his other LinkedIn posts, nobody pays him to help them with writing online because he's nowhere as good as it at it as he believes. Oh, that sucks. Dickie Bush, is that real? I worked for his buddy, Michael Hunt. That's weird. I work with Mike's friend, Huge Jazz. All right. So maybe this is satire. Um, I don't know. But anyways, if you can't afford to pay your people, your employees, then maybe your business model sucks. All right. Speaking of, I should have to pay my employees. I should have to pay my employees. As an employer, why shouldn't I be able to hire teens for free? What the else are they going to do during the summer months? Me hiring them for free, and maybe me receiving a stipend from the government for doing so, means that I am keeping teens off the street, keeps the crime rate down, and prevents drug addiction in the future. F this S. These kids are getting experience. I am educating them out of my pocket. Yes, I was fined today for not paying my staff a wage, and I am pissed. If only there was a word or term for making somebody work for free. Well, if you just called the employment an unpaid internship, it would be illegal. Like, yeah, you should. I don't care what positive good you think you're doing for society. Having people do labor for you for free is bad. So, would not recommend if you're running a business. If you're running a business, I recommend not having free labor working for your business. And I also don't recommend having an unpaid internship because that's bad. So here's how you should do an internship. Exactly. I'm a software engineer and get interns twice a year. We treat them exactly the same way as employees. We pay them as full employees for the few months that they're there, but they strictly focus on their projects. I'm no way saying unpaid internships should exist. They're absolutely unethical and they shouldn't exist. So, yes. If you are thinking about running an unpaid internship or you have an unpaid internship, screw you. I don't like you. I don't like your business model. I don't like your company. I never want to work for your company. So I don't care that I'm saying screw you. Because screw you. Like, screw off. You suck. You're a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. So, all right. Well, that was this week in LinkedIn lunatics and career craziness. I'm going to take a break because obviously my voice is shot, and then I'll be right back. So, catch you on the other side.
We miscommunicating, I'm miscommunicating. I just made a pilot, then they threw me on the stations. Now I'm not complaining, now I'm not complaining. My thoughts get complicated, I cannot explain in lameness. Never losing focus because I ain't chasing payments. Still playing in the basement while I'm working on arrangements. They heard the kid in 50 countries, thank God that's amazing. But I'd rather thank Spotify, they put me on the station. Same shit, different day, I'm just trying to get paid. Yeah, 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 I'ma stay in the shade.
All right, and we're back. So, I'm going to start this one off with some really cool career advice. So, I spend a lot of time on different subreddits, and one subreddit I spend time on is r/jobs. And I've seen some really good advice here. So, I'm going to share it. I'm going to read it. It's long. I'm not going to put you through the pain of hearing Robo Voice read it because, I mean, let's be real. It's not as good at reading as I am. So, I will read it and I'm going to kind of talk through it as I go. So, he says, I have interviewed, or they said, I've interviewed and hired hundreds of people. I stumbled across this channel and read some of the posts, and it occurred to me that there are a lot of questions and opinions being floated, but I haven't seen any actionable advice. Okay. I have seen some bad advice. So, first, who am I? I work these days in technology, but I've been a carpenter. I've worked in the marine industry as a boat captain and various scut work jobs. I've been a graphic designer and I've been a project management leader for 25 plus years with VP, SVP, and CPO titles. I've worked at huge companies, mid-sized companies, and I've founded 4 companies, 2 of which I was the CEO. So at the risk of pontificating, I thought I'd share some thoughts. Now, this is some really good advice, and I really like that they established their credibility at the beginning. So here we go. First, people are looking for coworkers, meaning people who they like, who are at the same level of competence as the rest of the team, not experience, who get things done, who are reliable, and who are creative problem solvers. Even at unsophisticated jobs, being a creative problem solver is a huge plus. You have to come across as likable, and ideally, you want the interviewer to start rooting for you to be successful. And the same applies for whenever because again, whenever they get there, do you want them to be successful? Yes. You're my teammate. I want you to be successful. I want you to be able to solve problems. I want to be able to try to teach you something and then you take the time to learn things. So they want to find these things out in the interview. Like, for example, if you have a teammate that just repeatedly cannot get it, even though you've explained it hundreds and hundreds of times, and they're not willing to go try to find the solutions and take the extra step, and you're having to walk them through every single step of their role, that's terrible. So we're trying to weed those people out in the interview. All right, continuing. So, how do you do that? You have to arrive at an interview ready to tell stories that capture the interviewer's attention and illustrate your value. Most interviewers are not good at interviewing, so you need to help them along. And let's be honest, most interviews hit on the same questions every single time. So, this is me adding here. You got, tell me about yourself. So you need to know where to start. Mark and I talked about this in the last podcast episode, but you need to know where to start with that. Tell me about myself question. What's a reasonable place and time for you to start telling them about yourself? Is it in the beginning of how I was born in Harris Southwest Hospital? I wasn't. Or is it like, well, I've always wanted to be an engineer. I grew up and I did this and I did this and I went to school for it and I learned this and I'm really glad that I went to that school because it really excelled at preparing me for this. And then I got my first job doing this because I'm interested in this. And now, uh, experience. Now here I am and I have all this experience and I am so well fit for this position. You've already answered all their questions about whether or not you have the background and experience to do the position. And that all comes from your story of tell me about yourself. Also, knowing how to answer the question, well, what's the time you had to collaborate in a difficult situation or deal with conflict? I mean, every single basic interview screen asks that question. You should know the answer. You should know the story. And you don't have to know it word for word, but you should know what you want to talk about. You shouldn't be reaching whenever you're getting that question. All right, so carrying on with what he says. These days, I screen for four things when I hire. I believe these things are universally desirable and necessary in order to be successful at any job: grit, integrity, empathy, and creativity. I believe that if you can exhibit and illustrate these four traits in an interview, you have a much better chance of being hired. So, what do these things mean and how do you illustrate them? One, grit. This is the ability to get a task or project done, even if you run into obstacles. You need to illustrate that you have initiative, that you can identify and solve problems that are blocking you. Sometimes this means asking for help, especially if you're junior, but mostly it means you keep on trying even if things get hard. Again, somebody with grit, me elaborating on here, somebody with grit is the kind of person that's not going to say, "Hey, man, I couldn't do it. Oh, that's outside my purview. Oh, I only read the bid documents. I don't read the contract. You have the contract. We gave it to you, or you know where it's located. It's like it's not the person that says, "Hey, oh, I can't find this." Well, did you look for it? Because we gave you the resources on where all those things are stored. We've taught you like 10,000 times that these things are stored in here, here, and here. Did you look? Did you even try? Or do I need to go and spoon feed it to you? All right. So have a story queued up, he goes on, that you can use to illustrate your grit. Tell a story about a really hard problem you had to solve. Summarize the background, explain what obstacles you ran into and how you solved them. For a first job, if you're junior, telling a story that isn't work related is okay, or a situation where you recognized a problem beyond your skill level and escalated to get help from your boss or a senior colleague, and then completed the project. Sometimes showing that you're a team player and that you have the humility to ask for help is better than struggling alone. However, if you're more senior, showing that you know how to get things done independently is probably more important. All right, he goes on. Two, integrity. Are you trustworthy and reliable? Illustrate that you have integrity by telling about a time you have a moral or ethical quandary and had to make the hard decision to do the right thing. Or if you're brave, a time where you did the wrong thing but learned from that failure. To be clear, I'm not talking about a time you made a mistake. I'm talking about a time you failed. At the time you did the wrong thing, you knew it, you made the decision and faced some consequences. Of course, it's important that if you go down that path, that you're focused on what you learned and why you won't make that mistake again. This can be really important if you have anything in your background that could become visible through a simple social media search or background check. Showing vulnerability in an interview, especially around integrity, can be the thing that gets an interviewer to start rooting for your success. So, I think this is important. I mean, I want to work with somebody that I can trust, that's going to be my teammate, not somebody that's going to go behind my back. So, good advice. Three, empathy. This is the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, walk around, see something from their perspective, and make decisions based on that insight. I would tell a story about a time where you struggled to work with somebody else. Oh, does that make sense? That's a question that they already asked. They ask about a time you struggled to work with somebody else. So maybe already had that story queued up. And if it's natural in conversation, just go ahead and tell the story because you're going to answer the question for them. They don't even have to ask it. Good idea. I would tell a story about a time when you struggled to work with someone else. Perhaps you didn't even like that person. Perhaps you disliked that person, but then you suddenly had an insight into why they were acting the way they were or what was driving them. You developed a sense of empathy for them and were able to work through the issues. Maybe you forged a great relationship, or maybe you just found a way to get by with that difficult coworker. But either way, this will illustrate empathy and the ability to collaborate with people, even if they are difficult. Yes, any employer wants to know that you can work with all different kinds of people. They don't want people that are abrasive. Four, creativity. This one is a bit trickier. When I interview candidates, I ask a question designed to elicit a story about creativity. So be careful about how you interject this into conversation. Tell a story about a time you figured out a solution to something difficult in a creative way. Maybe talking about a business you started, even something as simple as a lawn mowing business as a kid, or a project you did at church, or a summer project. I ask the person to tell me an idea that they've had for a company or product or non-profit or service and what is it, what is exciting about it to them. Then I ask them to think through several aspects of the idea and expand on it until they finally either prove that they can think things through and to the end, or that they run into a wall at some point. Either way, it's very illuminating as an interviewer. Okay, this is pretty good advice, but man, are you trying to steal their business ideas? I'm just saying. But I get it. You want to have some creativity, and I think that I wouldn't necessarily tell. Well, I could tell them about my podcast. That's one thing that I would talk about, and I can get really nitty gritty into all the technological nuances of things that I do when I'm interviewing people. Oh, I'd have a lot of fun talking about that. But I don't know if that's what I'd necessarily talk about for creativity. I think. Um, I don't know. When I was a kid, I wanted to make a golf ball vending machine. That was kind of fun. But all right. Anyways, they go on to say, I hope this is helpful. Just remember, hiring managers are looking for team members. They're figuring it out. If they're figuring out if they like you as well as if you're qualified. So it's really important that you let them look at you, the real you, so they can assess you for who you actually are. I've filed people out of interview processes because they were too guarded and weren't letting me get to know them. One last thing, as much as you're being interviewed, you should be interviewing them. Show up with good questions, do research about the company before you show up, and have a good reason for why you want to work there. If you discover that you don't like the people interviewing, find out if they're someone you will have to work with every day or if they're not someone you will work with every day. It may not be worth it to take the job if you don't like the people. Such good advice. I mean, this is just really good advice. So, if you're struggling, if you're finding out that you're just not getting success, getting calls back after interviews, watch this advice. Read this. I'll post the link. But this is just absolutely wonderful advice, and I think that everybody should consider um, following this advice. So yeah, this is good stuff. So think about it. Consider it. I'll send the link. I kind of put my comments in throughout, so I don't have too many comments. So let's go to the comments. Yeah, so let's look at some insights here. Most interviewers are not good at interviewing, so you need to help them along, especially if they're not somebody in HR. If they're just a hiring manager, they're probably not the best interviewer. Good insight. What are the insights? I would add looking for curiosity. I want people who are going to be interested in the larger context and how they fit into it, who are going to teach themselves the things they don't know. These are the people that will come up with proactive solutions to problems before they happen and not view something as outside their purview. And I commented here, I said, Amen. I'll tell you that working with the people that have the first instinct of that is out of my purview are some of the most frustrating people to work with. I get setting boundaries, but at some point you need to take initiative. I don't I replied to your comment, but it's outside my purview. Also, are you hiring? Um, yeah, if you have no professional curiosity, as this person said here, it just is difficult. So yeah, um, it I just think that that's really good advice. So thank you, Mister U slash the real Picard one for that advice. It's actually excellent advice, actionable, and I have given you a upvote for it. So good job, Reddit karma coming your way. All right, next question. Oh, by the way, if you have any other insights on that, please just leave your comments below. I think that um, sharing advice in the comment section is a great way to help people out. So share your advice. All right, next one.
Does anyone else on here prefer not to prepare for interviews? I feel like I've seen a bunch of interview-related posts lately, for obvious reasons that don't need to be explained. But I always read through them and am shocked with just how much preparation some people are putting into what sometimes amounts to 30 minutes of standard questions from potential future coworkers. Am I the only one that prefers to go into interviews with a clear mind, without rehearsed lines that I would fumble over trying to recall? Not to say that if it was a super specialized role that I wouldn't at least brush up on a particular topic. But I know my work experience. I know the roles and responsibilities I performed. I personally feel like it's easier for me to just naturally answer questions in an interview without it being a trick response. It also gives me the ability to go with the flow of the interview and oftentimes go way off course because I answered a question one that opened up an entirely new path for the interview to go. And had I rigorously prepared for the interview to go 1, 2, 3, I never would have been able to fluently and naturally just went off course. I can't be the only one, right? And for what it's worth, this has worked for me. And worked well. I'm just myself. Nothing more. Nothing less. But my potential employers leave knowing exactly who I am, and I feel like that leaves little doubt about what I can actually do in the role I'm applying for.
Yeah, so I'll say that I don't think it's good to say don't prepare for interviews. I think that I get the point that this person is making. But I think that there is a bare minimum of what you need to do to prepare for an interview. So, for example, researching the company, knowing generally what the company does, that's called preparing for an interview. And then also just having a general idea of what your stories are for the typical interview questions. I think that that's also a good thing. So, talking about a time that you worked with somebody, we just listened to a bunch of really good advice. So, have your stories prepared on common interview questions, and you don't have to know them word for word, but just knowing generally what you want to talk about, I think is good because that way you're not spending time fumbling for a story and trying to think of a story. You can just spend more time in the interview just, I don't know, talking about getting to know each other better and kind of figuring out what you want, like, or